Hey there, and welcome to Undoing We, Divorce and Life Conversations on WGSN-DB Going Solo Network, radio, podcast, and TV. I'm your host, Mardi Winder-Adams. I'm a divorce coach, a mediator, and someone who's been through exactly what you're going through. This show is all about helping you get through the tough stuff, the overwhelm of divorce, the what now moments, and the messiness of trying to rebuild your life. We're going to talk about real life challenges, share expert advice, and give you practical tools you can use to move forward with your life. Are you ready to start shifting from we to me? Grab a coffee, sit back, and let's get started. Today, I want to focus on an issue in divorce that I think is underutilized or misused, unfortunately, and it really should be a priority for anybody going through a divorce where they are dealing with a reasonable person to deal with the challenges of dividing property, setting up a co-parenting agreement, and dealing with assets and debts. And the magic tool that I am talking about is divorce mediation. And I think that divorce mediation is something that is required by a lot of court systems, but people don't necessarily understand the process. They don't necessarily understand how to hire a mediator that suits their particular style. And many people don't even realize that there are a ton of different options in mediation styles and ways that mediators provide their services. So today, I thought this would be an interesting topic to just take on because number one, if you can go through mediation as opposed to litigation in your divorce, you can get it done much quicker. And even more important for most people is you can dramatically, and I'm not joking when I say this, you can dramatically reduce the cost of divorce because you're going to work together with your partner, with a neutral third person in the room who is the mediator. And that person is trained in helping you communicate more effectively, deal with conflict, and to ask questions and even sometimes provide ways to take a look at an option that may give you a different insight into how you can resolve this. I do want to stress, though, I am a credentialed mediator. And one of the things that mediators don't do in most cases is tell couples how to solve their divorce issues. They cannot provide legal advice to either party because they are a neutral person in the room. So there is a lot of advantage to going through mediation. Number one, it's typically done now over Zoom in a lot of cases, or even if it's done face-to-face, it can be done over one session, multiple sessions. You might want to do homework in between. But the really great thing about mediation that anybody who's gone through it and it's been successful will tell you is you create the divorce settlement that you both are at least okay with. And I've heard people say this whole thing about mediation. Both parties have to walk away and not feel really good about the settlement, like they didn't get everything they wanted, and that's a good settlement. I don't believe that because I have seen and I have done mediations where everybody walks away and goes, wow, I got a lot better deal than what I thought I was going to get. So I think it's really important to understand that mediation is a process and there are options out there. And so what I've done today is I have got a clip of a conversation that I had with a phenomenal divorce mediator by the name of Michael Cohen. And Michael Cohen has a history of working with people, he does a very unique approach to mediation in my experience, where he actually spends a lot of time making sure the couple is comfortable with the process. He works over multiple sessions with people. And he breaks it down into manageable chunks so that it doesn't feel so overwhelming. Like we have to, dissolve 40 years of marriage in 4 hours sitting at a table today. That's not the way he approaches it. So I'd like you to just listen into this clip and hear Michael and I talking a little bit about the mediation process. We're going to talk about what mediators do and some of the things that they should not be doing or don't do in the mediation session. We're also going to talk a little bit about the benefits of mediation. And you may be surprised to hear a couple of the benefits that come out of this conversation. And I also think that this is going to be a good insight into at least several of the options that you have, or several of the things you should be thinking about when you are deciding, number one, if mediation is right for you. Number two, when to start looking for a mediator or using a mediator in the divorce process. And then number three, when you are actually talking to mediators, to have a really good idea of what's out there and how to ask questions to help yourself be prepared. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to play the clip. And then at the end, we're going to come up with some practical strategies and ideas that to help you select an effective mediator, and maybe to keep your ears open when you're talking to prospective mediators, some red flags that may indicate they're not the professional that you want to work with. Let me ask you a tough question. Where do you think the biggest mistake is that people make during the divorce process? You said for you it was going straight to an attorney. Do you think that's the same, that a lot of people do that?
I think it is. I think just like anything else in life, if you're not educated, you're not likely to make the best decision. So when I do a consultation, I help people understand there's 4 different paths you could go to divorce. I talk about the pros and cons of each one, and I help understand their situation and which one or two might be best for them. So a lot of people think you pick up the phone, you call a lawyer, and you go. Well, number one, there are lawyers that are litigators and there are amicable lawyers. You need to make a distinction between which kind you need, because that will drastically change your divorce. Number two, a lot of people don't understand you can start with a mediator. The best thing you could do if you're in an amicable divorce, or you think you can be, is to work with a mediator, have them prepare your entire agreement, and then knock on a lawyer's door and say, here's our entire agreement. Can you help us finish it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So let's start at the basics. Can you describe for people what a mediator does and how they are different than an attorney in the divorce process?
Sure. So when you have an attorney, you both have to have one, and those attorneys both represent you, and they both try to get the most for you from their vantage point. And from their vantage point, that's money or time, and that's great. But usually couples could come together and make their own decisions. So a mediator isn't representing either spouse. The mediator is representing the process. And the mediator has a full understanding of all of the decisions you have to make. So the worst thing you could do is do it yourself and not be thorough, because that leads to a lot of post-decree conflict and you end up in court after your divorce. So a mediator understands all the decisions you have to make, and they facilitate a conversation. They literally get involved sitting in between the two people and interpreting, oh, I heard you say this. How do you think about that? And there's other techniques you use, but by putting yourself in the middle, you help them hear each other and you guide them towards a compromise. And it is phenomenal when I see couples working together and leaning on each other and looking to each other to make decisions. It's one of the most heartwarming things I see, because they're going through a divorce, and as a mediator, you're able to get them to talk and make the best decision for the family. So that's probably what a mediator does, is sits between the clients instead of pulling them to the opposite extremes.
Right. And I always like to tell people when I describe it, I always say attorneys are looking for differences. Mediators are looking for commonalities or common ground that you can work together on. And let's face it, you built your wealth as a couple. You had your children as a couple. Why let some third person come in who doesn't know you from Adam or Eve and start telling you how you have to deal with your future? And that's where I think the power of mediation can really be.
I absolutely love that. If you think of anything in your life where somebody imposed a decision on you, you're more likely not to like it and have a grudge or have baggage about it, versus the decisions you make yourselves. When you make your own decision, you understand what you gave up to get that, and it's valuable to what you got. The one thing I want to just throw out too, because I think there's an important distinction. Some people might think, well, if you're a neutral facilitator, how am I being protected? You could still be represented by a lawyer within a mediation process. So For the parenting side of things, generally you don't need a lawyer. You're making your own decisions about your family. For the finances, there are some areas for couples who have very disparate incomes or significant assets that might be divided in a way that's fair or unfair. Like I will always tell them before we start that session, this is a point where you might want to get some legal guidance. So when we sit down, you are educated about what your rights are. They could bring a lawyer into the session. They could get educated beforehand, but they'll always be guided to seek that education before we make decisions. And then even at the end of the mediation process, a lawyer has to review it and a judge has to approve it. So there's a lot of safeguards built in.
Yeah. And I thank you for saying that, because a lot of when I was doing a lot of the family mediations, a lot of times both parties had an attorney with them. If they weren't sitting in the room with them, they were available by phone. Like you can pick up your phone, you can call your attorney. The other thing is, and I believe I know you have the background in financial planning, but I think a lot of media, like myself, I don't. So sometimes a CPA would also come in, and both parties may have their own financial planners or advisors. Lots of different experts can come in. So yeah, you're not just sitting in a room. And the thing I like about your mediation, can you talk about like, how do you start working with people? Like how do you make that happen?
I get a phone call or I get a connection or whatever. I'm probably unique in the industry because I do a lot of consultation. Like I will talk to the wife for an hour, 2 hours, however many times. I'll talk to the husband. I'll bring them both together. I want them to be educated before we start. I want to make sure that they both understand the process and their questions are asked. Then I'll bring them together. And I tell them they need to assess whether I'm a good fit for them. But at the same time, I'm assessing whether they're a good fit for mediation, because some clients say they want to mediate to save money, but they're really not good mediation clients. And that's not something that I want to do. Once we start working together, I start with the parenting aspect. That's 70% of the process. I like to work on the kids because I could look at them and look them both in the eye and say, I'm certain you both want to do what's best for your children. And they both agree. And I start with the easy questions, right? And we start to build momentum. And after a few minutes, I say, this isn't that hard, is it? And they go, no, this is really easy. And it's really easy to help gain momentum that way. When we finish everything about the children, we try to put that on the shelf. Like we try to say we're finished, but naturally they could change it as we go along. And then we pivot to the financial piece, because I don't like the kids to be a pawn in the financial discussions. And I don't like them to use those as leverage to say, well, if I'm only getting that, then you don't get the kids this long. So I try to make it two separate processes, but naturally we could go back and forth. But I try to make it separate because I want the best and healthiest outcome for the children.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. Like if a parent is listening and saying, well, I get how this might help me save money, but you also talk about the positive impact that this process can have on the kids during the mediation, but also in their life afterwards. Can you talk a little bit about how you see mediation having a positive impact for the children and the family?
Yeah, I mean, people come into mediation. Some people do it to save money, and that is the biggest difference. It's so inexpensive compared to litigation. But this is what you just asked is the most valuable component of mediation, in my opinion. When a couple is married and mom and dad aren't on the same page, the kids know it, right? And the kids find the gaps in between. And especially when they're teenagers, it leads to behaviors that neither parent wants them to do. So when parents are united, kids understand there's a common roof over their heads. There's a team that's looking out for them. They can't play one parent off the other, and they know they have to watch their P's and Q's in a sense. So I tell parents that when they got married, they had a view of how they wanted their children to develop socially, emotionally, intellectually, physically. And that view is still possible. When you mediate, and when you co-parent in a very effective manner, and you're communicating and being flexible, and the kids see that mom and dad are still mom and dad. They don't have to be holding hands, but they're standing right next to each other and they're working together for the kids' benefit. They know that they still have a team that's looking out. There's not too many gaps to go find these unhealthy behaviors.
Sure.
So I think that's one of the best benefits when you litigate or even if you parallel parent, which is when you're not communicating and working really well together, the kids find those gaps, and that's where their development changes, and that's where a child of divorce is affected in a negative way because there isn't the proper parental supervision at the time.
So that was a short clip of the whole conversation that Michael Cohen and I had a little while ago about divorce mediation. And some of the things that I think I want to highlight after having that conversation with Michael is that this idea of litigation or lawyering up as soon as you're going through a divorce is not the most effective for many couples going through divorce. So I believe in being authentic, real, truthful, and sharing sometimes some unpleasant information with people, but I think it is really important. So number one, most couples are going to fall on that amicable scale. In other words, their sole goal in life through the divorce is not to burn everything to the ground and destroy the other person and, grab everything, take everything. Most people going through divorce are going to go through a period where they're very angry, they're very frustrated, they feel unhappy, they feel that perhaps their partner betrayed them, let them down. So you get why people can be angry. And if you've been through divorce, I have been, anger is normal, right? But we also know that most people, once they calm down from that initial response to the whole idea of divorce, that anger tends to dissipate relatively quickly. And people are able to come to fair, logical, rational decisions about how they want to move forward with the divorce. So I would recommend that if your partner and you have been able to have a fairly decent relationship where you had challenges, you were able to work together to come to decisions, and you feel that the other person is at their core fair, honest, and wants to do something that is in their best interest and your best interest, mediation is probably a very effective tool. The groups of people that I think you can still try mediation, but you may not see the same positive outcomes are people that are living with the high conflict individuals and divorcing them, because these people tend to approach any kind of negotiation as I'm going to take everything or nobody's getting anything. So these are the kind of people that are not always effective in mediation because they're not authentic. They're not there in good faith, and they are not really trying to solve the problem. They're trying to continue to control or to manipulate or to gaslight or to continue that conflict because that's the only way that they know they can get your attention at this point in life. So that group is not always good for mediation. The second group of people that I really have concerns about mediating with are people where there is a history and a record in the household of domestic violence, particularly physical violence or emotional abuse, financial abuse, obviously, because that's a lot of manipulation around the finances. And so when those are big issues in the breakup of the relationship, that can be a challenge at the mediation table, because how do you trust that person is being honest? And how do you avoid that abuse and that trauma that you've experienced from impacting your ability to make decisions at the mediation table? I do want to throw this in here, though, because I do believe in this. I was a domestic violence client advocate for many, many years. And if the person who has been in a domestic violence situation, whatever that abuse may look like, even if it's not physical, even if it's emotional, mental, financial, which is just as devastating, but if they have worked on themselves and they have support in that room, they should not be denied the opportunity to mediate if they feel that they are able to. But for that particular group of people, number one, their safety should be paramount when deciding if mediation is appropriate. And then number two, I really do believe that they should have a representative in the room with them, whether it is their attorney, their therapist, or somebody that is trained in supporting them. Those are the people that I'm I really want to make sure that they are very protected during the mediation process. With all that being said, most couples, probably 85% of couples, if not 90%, are going to resolve their divorce out of court. So, like Michael spoke about, getting a mediator involved even before you get an attorney involved can help you save a lot of money. You don't have to have an attorney to go to mediation. As Michael said, though, it is going to be important when you do get the settlement completed and you've got it nailed down and all the, the T's crossed and the I's dotted with regards to the assets, the debts, the financial picture, and then the co-parenting plan. You are going to want to take that to an attorney, and each one of you should have your own attorney to do this and have that then transferred into legalese, as I like to call it, to make sure it's covered all the bases and nothing is missed from that. That's required by your jurisdiction for going through the divorce process. So as Michael talked about, and when we were talking, we were bringing up different points about mediation. So like Michael said, it's really important that you are educated on what the process is. It is important when you go into mediation to make sure you know your numbers. Make sure you know what is a fair settlement. So what's the lowest offer you can accept and what is the highest offer you can expect from the other person. And then if you're offered something in the negotiation that falls between those two limits, you can walk out of there and know that you've got a good settlement. You've got a fair settlement that gets you what you need. So you have to do some of this work in advance. And that's where mediators like Michael can really help you, because they ask you those questions and they really support you in being prepared for the process. The other thing that Michael talked about was the emotional cost of divorce. And I have, in my divorce mediation experience, I have also seen couples that come in and have said to me, we're court ordered to do this, but we're not going to get this done. And when the mediator starts with the questions that the couple is already moving towards agreement on, you can start really building that momentum of understanding that you are not there to be enemies of each other. You just both want to get a fair settlement out of it. And by starting correctly, by spending time, by asking the right questions, you can be pleasantly surprised at the progress that you can make. And even if you don't get everything settled, you can get a large number of the issues settled. The more of those you have settled, the less issues you have to deal with in court, which also helps reduce the cost of the cost of the divorce process. The one thing that Michael mentioned at the end that we were having a conversation about, and I really hope you caught it, was the benefits that mediation can have for your kids. And the reason that this is such a big factor to consider is because you are going to have to continue to co-parent together. Maybe that's for a few years if your kids are teens, or maybe that's for, a decade or more if your kids are little ones. So when you can work together and come to the table and sit down and have a conversation and learn with the help of a mediator how to have these conversations, you can help be better, happier, lower conflict co-parents, which means that your kids are not going to be exposed to ongoing conflict post-divorce. And we know how important that is. The lower the conflict that kids are exposed to, the better they tend to adjust to living in two separate households, the better they feel happy, healthy, and supported by both of their parents. So there's a lot of benefits to using divorce mediation as a way to resolve your divorce issues. And I'm really glad that Michael was able to share that with us. I hope you found this session valuable. I hope it triggered maybe a few thoughts, a few questions, some curiosity about how you could use divorce mediation as a way to resolve your issues without involving the courts, litigation, and a whole bunch of added conflict and stress for yourself and your children. And again, I just want to thank my guest, Michael Cohen, for sharing his information. And all Michael's details are going to be in the show notes if you want to reach out and work with him. Thanks for sharing your time with me on Undoing We. If this episode resonated with you, be sure to share it with a friend and don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. If you're looking for some more support, be sure to grab my guide, 5 Strategies for Better Communication During Divorce and Other Life Transitions. The link is going to be in the show notes. And remember, no matter what you do today, do something special for yourself because you